Hey, Cypher here, and today I want to give a modified version of a talk that I gave to my department a little while ago. By the way, I'm just working off of bullet points, so this isn't actually scripted, it's just bullet pointed, okay? The original version had a lot of proprietary information in it, so I have to, imagine a way around it. Also, I can't figure out a good way of editing this and making it visually stimulating, so it's mostly going to be just me talking. So this talk was about the scholarly benefits of doing YouTube for historians. Basically, the challenges and benefits of what I do. And I'm doing this as kind of like a preliminary step to getting prepared for a panel that I'm putting together for the Organization of American Historians about doing YouTube history. And I know that there are a couple of other YouTubers that are going to be coming with me on that, so this is also for you guys. What got me started on YouTube? How did I get into this crazy thing? Originally, I actually did it on a dare. I was complaining to friends that there wasn't really any history version of SciShow. There was a lot of science content on YouTube, and some of it wasn't just pure education, but like entertainment and analysis and things that are beyond just trying to teach at a grade school level. And I was complaining to my friends, and they got annoyed with me constantly complaining, and eventually they got fed up and just said, well, then you do it. So I tried. And while this has never been a history show competitor to like SciShow or anything like that, it's kind of developed all along the years. Heck, some of you might remember, I didn't start off being called the cynical historian. I started off calling myself Cynical Cypher. That's why I always start with the Cypher thing. When I was about to get my master's degree, that's when I changed to the Cynical Historian. I just thought it fit better for what the content had become. And I've learned a lot along the way. In fact, one of the main things that academia is kind of avoiding seeing is that there's a lot of scholarly benefits to doing YouTube. So the first main benefit is that it's a visual medium. Besides just your face, you can have text on screen, you can show movies that you're talking about, but really importantly is that you can show primary sources. Oftentimes if I'm quoting something, I'll just put that source on screen and highlight the bit that I'm quoting. Or you can even have things like if it's a presidential speech that was given by like Ronald Reagan, then we have video of it, so you can just cut to the actual video. This is something you can't do with a monograph. Plus, having imagery associated with what you're talking about, even if it's a bad representation, is still better than just words on a page, because a picture is worth 1,000 words. A further benefit is that you can hyperlink. You can link to things that you're talking about, or you can link to previous work that you've done. Imagine being able to write an article for a journal that links back to previous articles that you've written. That's just not really possible. You can reference previous work, sure, but you can't just have a direct link that people can click on. And with all of that, you don't have to go through peer review, you don't have to go through typesetting and editing. You're the one publishing. So it's really easy publishing. Of course, there's a lot of downsides to that. Obviously, you can make mistakes, you can accidentally not really hit the points that you wanted to make. That kind of thing happens all the time, and on YouTube, you're expected to upload rapidly. You're supposed to have regular uploads. So it can be pretty difficult, but it also is very easy to publish, which is not something you can say about regular academic publishing. And once it's all out there, you get a lot of engagement. I mean, one of the most popular books I have on my shelf from recent years, Blood and Thunder, I actually have 2 copies of this. This doesn't get half as many views as I do. A lot of historians can only dream of that much engagement, but if you get on YouTube, you can have that much engagement. You have a much larger audience, and it's international in scope. I've talked to many of you guys from countries that I've been barely aware of at times. And seriously, there are viewers who even comment that they're viewing from a particular country that I know nothing about their country. Of course, you don't start off that way. Everyone has to start a channel from nothing and then build from there. So you have to build a reputation as you go. Of course, that's actually kind of a benefit. Viewers are often very understanding of you having to grow. So you get better in terms of editing, better in terms of writing, better in terms of scholarship, better in terms of your ability to expect what the audience wants. And trust me, commenters let me know about things I need to improve. And hopefully with it, you grow as a scholar. Even if you're prominent in the field, YouTube offers you particular avenues of growth that are unavailable to regular scholars. And you get to kind of escape the ivory tower. Some historians take great issue with the idea of an ivory tower, that they think that they're, among the common people and that, but you spend a bit of time on YouTube and you learn very quickly that academia is nowhere close to dealing with regular folks. And oftentimes, people outside of the ivory tower have ideas that the ivory tower seems incapable of thinking for itself. So you have the ability to grow as a scholar, not only in terms of just having to put out new material and learn from your mistakes and everything, but also to learn from your audience. And as the audience builds, they become a community. Everyone is talking with each other. That is a community. And that means that as you get to know your community and they get to know you, everyone builds off of each other, hopefully. And there's other ways of maintaining a good connection. So there's like Facebook, Twitter, and a Discord server specifically for this channel. Also in the wild world of YouTube is collaborating with other channels. So the history community as a whole know each other. We basically all know each other because we communicate through like Slack servers and whatnot, so that we can maintain contact and, build a community as a whole. And of course, there's always the comments section, which can often be pretty nasty and brutal, for sure, and we'll get to that. But you can even learn from those nasty comments. You can learn what are touchy subjects and pressure points for regular folks, even though when you're stuck up in the ivory tower, a lot of times things that you think are sensitive issues are very much not sensitive issues, and some things that you think are just like, duh, of course, this shouldn't be an issue, actually are an issue in the wider public. I mean, I've had to constantly remind myself that this is not the ivory tower, that I can't expect people to just kind of nod and get along with me, even if they disagree. And that's actually a good thing, because you get to learn what the public cares about. Plus, there's always seeing that outreach, that gratification from seeing people learn. I've seen a number of commenters that as they start off angry and denying everything I say, and then turn around, perhaps still trying to argue with me, but then they start using evidence, or they come around on an issue. It's incredible to watch somebody go from being an angry commenter to, they don't have to agree with me, but becoming more scholastic in their reasoning. And it makes me happy when you guys cite your sources, especially if you're arguing with me. That is incredible. Now, sometimes people will source like conspiracy theory websites and that ain't gonna pass. But when people, cite Wikipedia or something like that, cool. And a further scholarly tool is present in that comments section that you don't get with monographs or articles. You can pin a comment. So if you make a mistake or you have to make a clarification or something like that, you can pin a comment. Oftentimes I'll just pin the comment of somebody who has corrected me, but sometimes I have to put multiple things in that pinned comment, so I can't just pin one person. That right there allows you to make addendums. Now, scholars can do this with secondary editions and that. There's always going to be errata? I have no idea how to say that. Errors that you have to state in the beginning of a book. And openly admitting your errors is pretty important in terms of building a community, because that humanizes the storyteller, something that oftentimes you can't really do with a book until at least the second edition. But after all, the comment section can be really nasty. And that's because on YouTube there is an entire segment of the viewership who are reactionaries. They're coming from reactionary channels. Something that the history community really needs to start fighting, because these aren't doing the trick in fighting off bad history. I mean, you have to pay for a book. You have to pay to be associated with a research library or anything like that. So putting your work in academic publications necessarily cuts your message off from the vast majority of the population. So YouTube is in fact where a lot of historical interpretation is fought for. This is where the fight for history begins. This is the front line. But of course, part of the reason why so many scholars do not get into YouTube is because, well, it's technically difficult. A lot of historians are not very technically savvy. We are Luddites by our very profession. I mean, the only reason why I could get into it in the beginning is because I can build PCs. I was a draftsman for a long time. I'm a little bit technically proficient with some of these things, especially when compared to other historians. So there's 6 basic steps to making a video and putting it out. First is research. As with anything in history, you've got to research it. Now, I've already got a few videos on how to research history. Basically, you want to start with the historiography and work your way back to primary sources. But in the world of YouTube, you don't have the time to do a full-on research project. That takes weeks and weeks and weeks of reading, whereas you've got basically 1 week. Now for me, I'm often using stuff that I've already researched in the past, or I'm piggybacking off of secondary sources rather than doing any primary research myself. But this is an academic publishing. That's the point. This is its own form. And you've got to be quick in terms of researching everything, but you get a pretty nice return because you can start a project by making a video on it, and then see those comments and build off of it. So research is different on YouTube because of how quickly it has to be done, but it's still the same basic principle. Now I've got to say, for the rest of these steps, it's very easy to go back steps. It's not like, you know, I get done with researching and move straight to writing. Oftentimes, I'll have other projects I'm working on or anything along those lines, but the next step is writing. It just doesn't always happen sequentially, and oftentimes you end up going backwards. So writing for YouTube is necessarily different from writing a monograph or anything like that. For instance, you get to use contractions, and you might think that that's, you know, something pretty silly, like, okay, who cares about using contractions? But that necessarily changes the way you do everything. The idea is that it's supposed to be more personal. It's YouTube. And remember, these things are extremely short, so I end up having to write them in a very different style. There's a rule of writing that I use from the creators of South Park that basically says everything should be a and or a but, something that continues it, as if it's one long run-on sentence, the entire story that you're telling. So oftentimes I'm beginning sentences with so, like I just did with this sentence. That wouldn't fly in academic writing, but this is a different medium. So writing has to be conversational in tone, is basically what I'm getting at. Now, I do have footnotes on my scripts, but normally for completely different reasons than I do for some sort of academic paper. And people aren't going to be checking my work through my script, they're going to be checking it through the video. So footnotes are essentially things that I use for later production. So I am saying what the source is that I'm quoting, or I am saying, hey, note this on the video, so that people will actually know what I'm talking about without having to get into the depths. But keep in mind, everything has to be very short. So oftentimes I am summarizing entire books in mere sentences, and that's kind of necessary to do. And I hate to say it, but a lot of YouTube just has a very limited attention span. And throughout this, I've been using jump cuts to just take out all the times where I'm just going, duh, because that is the aesthetic of YouTube. It has to be quick. So you have to make your scripts very short. Once you're done writing comes the third step, the thing that I am technically doing right now, performing. Now in the original presentation I showed like all the equipment that I use and explained how you can start with literally just a cell phone, but this is on YouTube. I'm actually using some of that equipment right now. I guess I'll put something up that just lists all the hardware that I use regularly, but in terms of getting started there's a lot better channels than me to talk about that kind of thing. And as the audience builds, you can start getting more of that money to work towards getting better equipment. Basically, all of the Patreon funding that I have goes to making the channel better. That is my overhead for everything. That's not what overhead is. I am not a businessman. It's the cost of operation. And the Patreon allows me to weather hits in that as well. So as you build an audience, you can make your equipment better. Now I'm using a DSLR. I started off with a GoPro, because back when I started in 2013, phone cameras were not an option. Once you have that stuff all set up, you've got to perform. You have to have a steady demeanor that everybody will recognize so that you're not wildly shifting in tone from one video to the next. And how I do that is quite literally, I just drink. Just enough liquid courage to get it into that happy, bouncy mood that everybody wants from YouTube, because I'm kind of a dour dude, I think. So something I try to prefigure before doing all the performance stuff is whether I'm going to do voiceover or camera work. If I'm on camera, there just isn't enough pictures to lay over it during editing. But voiceover is a lot easier to perform because you don't have to do entire sentences with each take. But it really comes down to the next step, editing, and how much editing you're willing to do. With a camera, it's a lot less editing and a lot less visual stuff that you have to put around. Now, in terms of editing, I'm not really going to talk too much about that because I think, once again, there's enough YouTube channels to learn from on that I am not a good source. What I will say is that I use Premiere Pro for my main video editing, and I use Audition for audio editing. And it's here that you can actually build in a lot of meaning, because doing simple effects can compound what you're trying to get across, or can explain something that you weren't able to say in the video. So putting text on screen, sometimes I use a VHS filter to say that something's not exactly right. So a lot of the time I will do that with maps, and almost always maps are just kind of faulty. But even just showing a bevel around a video thumbnail indicates that that's something you can go to. This does take a pretty powerful computer though, because you don't want to be editing on a potato. So that's the one place that people shouldn't cheap out on when starting a channel. It also means exporting the files once they're all done happens a lot quicker. And then once you have that file, then comes publishing. So I try to upload on a schedule every Tuesday at 10:30 my time. 10:30 basically because that's when I wake up. I'm a student. I don't like waking up. When you're uploading, you can make a custom thumbnail that expresses what you're trying to get at and makes it, click-worthy. And then there's the description, which that's where I put like my sources. There's also links to like my social media and Patreon and everything like that. pretty basic stuff that you kind of build as you're building a channel. Then there is the info cards that pop up in the corner of the screen. This is all stuff that you can learn elsewhere, but the main thing is put sources in the description. Then once you release it, there is the final step, maintaining the video. So the first thing that you have to take into consideration is copyright and demonetization. Copyright claims happen pretty regularly, but I always fight them, and eventually you get known for fighting them, and then people stop bothering you as much. I haven't had a major copyright claim in months, at least while I'm recording this. Who knows when I'm going to publish it. And demonetization remains an incredible problem, and YouTube is constantly violating their own ethics on that, and I've been pretty vocal about demonetization in diatribes and whatnot. But that comes with the territory of publishing on this platform. But then you also have to worry about comments. As I said before, you can learn a lot from the comments, but they tend to be a bit crazy sometimes. Not just sometimes, basically all the time. But I also maintain a filter that tries to capture certain words, and then if they say those words, I have to approve the comment. And if you get really good at it, you can learn words that the really vociferous ones use. And so you catch the idiots before they spread their hate onto your video. 'Cause ultimately, it is your channel. And I have a strict policy against hate. You can hate on a government, you can hate on inanimate objects or anything along those lines, you can hate on art, but as soon as you start hating on people, that's where I draw the line. So that spreads from conspiracy theorists to just plain old racists. Of course, there's the unique blending of those two, which is genocide deniers. And those all get fiercely deleted, and to delete some of those comments is extraordinarily satisfying. But sometimes a comment section can become too unwieldy, and if I just don't want to deal with it, I could just disable it. Now this is actually a pretty controversial thing to do. People get really annoyed if you close a comment section, and there's no way to stop them from commenting constantly without just disabling the comment section altogether. What I've done in the past is just make a comments response video and then disable the comments in the original video. That stops a lot of the idiots, and it still gives a forum for other people to go to if they're not being an idiot. So I'm going to end this by talking about the slave myths video, which is still the most popular video on this channel. Now when I put it out, I was a very small channel. I think I had like 8,000 subscribers, maybe. And then by a couple of weeks later, I had like 25,000 subscribers. The video got hundreds of thousands of views in the first couple of weeks, and it was absolutely crazy for that weekend after I released it. The comments were nasty. I had 2 legitimate death threats. They looked up my address and then threatened it. In fact, they were technically threatening my parents because I didn't live there, but they were literally threatening with an address. Those are credible death threats. So YouTube can be a nasty place, and eventually I made a comments response video, and I hadn't disabled the comments on that video at all, and by the time I started my PhD program, there was still constant hatred flowing from that video, and I finally just disabled the comments, and it has led to an incredible peace of mind, because now most of the idiots are too dumb to go and look up the comments response video. And it's that kind of hatred which is the reason why there are no female history YouTubers. Seriously, every history YouTuber that is a woman that has gotten on here has quit rather quickly, partially because of the pure hatred that commenters like to spew. But that also is something that we need to change as a profession. The history profession needs to get on YouTube. If there were more historians on YouTube, then we could fight these trolls, these troglodytes. This is where the battle for historical interpretation is waged. Fighting ignorance is difficult, for sure, but it is worthwhile.